If you live in a Western country, it is likely that you share the perspective that if countries like Russia or China, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba had a liberal democratic form of government, then there wouldn't be any tensions with these countries. Well, this means that you're looking at these issues from the perspective of the democratic peace theory. The theory is quite simple. It says that countries that have a liberal democratic form of government don't go to war against other countries that also have a democratic form of government. It's not saying that they don't go to war at all, but that they don't go to war against democracies. The possibility of going to war against a non-democracy is still there. According to the theory, the way that democratic countries are structured, where the leaders are accountable to voters, makes war unattractive because the costs and risks of starting a war that affects a large part of the population can make voters throw the leaders out of office. But it's not just about having elections, it's also about sharing the ideological principles of democracy, like having a free market, believing in the concept of human rights, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, etc. According to the theory, as the number of democratic countries increases, the possibilities of going to war decreases. So if every country in the world had a democratic form of government, then war would be very rare. This perspective divides countries into good countries and bad countries according to their system of government. Democracies are the good guys and non-democracies are the bad guys. So it tends to be okay with changing the political system of non-democracies with the belief that if every country in the world had a similar ideology and democratic system, then it would be rare for wars to happen. The theory belongs to the liberalist school of thought in international relations. However, there is disagreement with the competing school of thought called realism. These two schools of thought represent different worldviews, two different ways of thinking about international relations. So I'm going to give you both perspectives, and you're probably not gonna like it because the realist perspective tends to be quite controversial, but if you're a student of international relations, then you just have to know it. For example, let's say that China changes its form of government to the same type of system as the US. Those that look at this from the perspective of the democratic peace theory would support it, because countries that have a liberal democratic form of government would be considered more peaceful, since they don't fight against other democracies. So from this perspective, there would be less tension between both countries. But let's say that China keeps on growing in economic power, because the understanding is that democratic countries are considered more productive than non-democratic countries, more economically successful. So how would other countries in the region react to China becoming a much stronger country, where the balance of power is even more on China's side, but at the same time, it has a liberal democratic form of government? The realist perspective would argue that it doesn't matter what type of government China has, what matters are its power capabilities, because the international system is still anarchic, it's a self-help system with no higher authority above countries. Looking at intentions instead of power is unreliable, because countries can never be certain of the intentions of other countries in the future. Countries can only 100% rely on themselves and their own capabilities. The realist logic would be to continue increasing your power capabilities to balance against China for your own protection, regardless of what China's political system is. You're balancing against its power capabilities, not against its political system. It would be a mistake to just focus on the political system of a country and allow it to keep on increasing its relative power and not worry about it. You don't want your country to be at a power disadvantage in the future if things go wrong. So realists believe that because of the way the international system is structured, it is still possible to have a war between a democratic country and another democratic country. The only reason why you would want to change the political system of China to a liberal democracy is if that system is able to bring the opposite effect and instead weaken China instead of strengthening it. Because when you're competing against another country, why would you want to promote a political system that is supposed to make that country even stronger? If your goal is to prevent a country from becoming a regional hegemon, the last thing you want is for the regional countries to see that country as part of the good guys and cooperate even more with it, because that's how you create the hegemon that you're trying to prevent. So you can see how both perspectives have their own logic and how they clash with each other. The democratic peace theory cares about what type of government a country has, where conflicts would be prevented if every country was a liberal democracy. It argues that while anarchy still exists, countries can still be peaceful if they all agree to abide by the same ideologic democratic principles. If China was to adopt a Western type of liberal democratic system, this perspective would argue that there would be less geopolitical tensions because democracies don't fight against each other and they would cooperate even more. While the realist perspective focuses on looking at the power capabilities of a country and the balance of power situation, regardless of a country's political system or ideology, because it is still possible to have a democratic country fight against another democracy. The US-China geopolitical competition will continue unless there is a change in the balance of power, where there is no longer a need to balance against each other anymore. However, in this case, currently, both perspectives reach the same conclusion, which is that China will be considered a threat. They just disagree over why. One says that it's because of the political system, the other one says that it's because of the power capabilities. So that's the question. Do you agree with the democratic peace theory perspective that conflicts would be solved if every country was a liberal democracy? Or do you agree with the realist perspective, where we will still have great power countries balancing against each other, regardless of their ideology or political system, but because of the way the international system is structured? So feel free to write your thoughts in the comment section. And there are also other perspectives that you can also apply, like the economic interdependence theory, or international institutions, or alliances, which I'll probably make a video on those topics later in the channel, so subscribe if you want to see more.